All right, we're back. A couple week hiatus from me and Kenny's schedules not aligning. I've been busy out of town, and figured people got sick of hearing me rag on Jody's teams. So um, here we are this week. No weekly thing other than I'll acknowledge, since Jody asked me to, that his teams have been putting up points and either winning or putting up points and losing. So now that he's finally performing well, I'm gonna skip a couple. Because everyone knows I don't like saying good things about Jody. So shout out to Jody. You had a couple good weeks. Uh, Moving on this session, all on trades this year. Gonna go through recap, give our definitely not biased opinions on grades, do some discussions, and go from there on what we think. So I got Kenny here to give me more bad takes, even out my stuff. So to start us off, we're gonna start back at the beginning of the year with one of Kenny's trades. So don't listen to a thing he says because it's all biased and bullshit. And we're gonna start off with the Tua trade. And I gotta say, I panned this from the minute it happened, and it only got worse. Um, from a grade perspective, I think it was an easy A for Kenny. Um, and I give a C to T Wells. I really wanted to give it a D, but I'll assume that I have more hate for Russell Wilson than anyone, but maybe Steven, who thinks he's a
Uh,
dumpster fire.
Steven's got more hate, so you can claim second most hate for Wilson in the league,
And it's really
and that
just because the
was
Broncos look like ass.
hmm
I don't actually hate Russell Wilson. I loved him in Seattle, but man, do they look like trash. So
Nathaniel Hackett should get fired within one season.
he's right there with Matt Canada on people that need to be fired. Um, yeah, when we look at this trade, I view that it was a panic trade for T. Wells. He panicked that Tua had a head injury and sold the farm quickly, and he ended up with the worst quarterback and giving up a better pick. Um, this was made a little bit better for me when I realized that he at least has swap rights between his or mine, especially when
hmm
I started tanking and like you just gave up the number 12 pick. Um, but a little better,
Yeah,
but
yeah, it was basically set up to get the worst second round pick that he had. So
so it's not as bad. But I mean, Tua has shown that he's still the much better option here. Cheaper next year. I mean, more
that was the
electric
hard part at
offense.
the I guess kind of how our talk was at the time was we both thought Wilson, like, we thought the Broncos would figure it out, which has obviously not happened. Um, but like thought Wilson's a little bit better just off of some of that like Seattle history and stuff like that prior to. No, I don't think anyone expected Tua to come back and continue to be like the best second year or third year quarterback
I
ever.
did. I did.
uh
There's a
like
reason I reached out to you on, hey, give me Tua, right after you made the trade.
because at the time of the trade too, he had like a mediocre week one. Then he had the fourth quarter against the Ravens, I think it was, right, when they
Yep.
made that big comeback, and then got hurt. And like to that point in his career, he'd only had two 20-point games a year for like fantasy wise. So that was kind of where the thought process was. Obviously, yeah, now it doesn't look great since Tua. Like I said, I didn't expect Tua to be the best fucking quarterback, third year quarterback ever.
I mean, that
But
offense is just explosive. I mean, it's doing what I thought, which is why I reached out to you to try to get Tua right away. I'm not completely sold that he's going to be the best guy ever, but like in that offense, you have so many weapons that if they ever put together for a full game, he's, you know, a top five quarterback just from fantasy points. I don't may not believe he's a top five quarterback in the NFL, but fantasy wise, he's a top five guy with that offense. So
I think I think when we talked afterwards, you had valued like Tua around like a late second.
yeah, we lost Kenny, but Chrome's been a fun thing for me lately. So we'll see whenever we get him back. So or maybe we won't. We'll see when we get him back. So in the meantime, I'm gonna assume that conversation is mostly there. We lost you, Kenny. My Chrome is complicated and being a pain.
You
Um, so we're just gonna move on. I lost you when we started talking trade stuff. So as I close out some stuff here. All right. So
I still see me and hear me
okay,
on
well I
the.
don't. So which means the recording won't. But eh,
Can you hear me?
Sporadically.
Mm,
Give me a minute. I'm messing with it. It's not you, it's me, for sure.
oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure. I've had Chrome issues for a while, like the last week, so. Alright, moving on to the next trade. We got the Travis Kelce trade. Um, I struggled to put grades on this, but there's a good part of me that thinks this is a solid A for both teams. Um, I know I talked to several people, and I think Kelce is the biggest impact player on an expiring contract you could possibly have. He's by far the best tight end, and so much better than everyone else at his position that there's no one else that even comes close. Um, so as much as I think expiring deals are normally about second round picks, paying a late first, assuming James doesn't massively implode with his several game lead in my division, that guarantees a bottom four pick, and a third round pick is kind of whatever. Um, the only thing I would have liked to see from T. Wells was him go and get a future first from James and say, all right, go rebuild it, rather than getting a first this year. But if that's all you could get, then it's not bad. Also, this year's draft is supposedly pretty good, so we'll see what that looks like.
I really like it for T Wells. For James, I do like I know Kelce is I think I was one of the people that was on the like Kelce is the biggest impact guy on an expiring deal that we might ever have in the league because of like positional scarcity and whatever else. But I'm also not sure.
And we lost him again. Oh, interwebs, 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 interwebs. Everything's dying. So my computer's just dying. Oh boy.
Be even a bit less. But what?
My computer taking a dump. We're just gonna start killing stuff until we get there. Alright. I'm gonna keep trying to monitor that, but yeah. So yeah, I mean James is there. I think it makes James better by far, but the question is gonna be,
Yes.
like I said, he's still thin. One injury, and that can be a really questionable thing. Although, like I said, he's got such a lead that all he's got to do is luck into another win or so, and he's pretty much locked into that, at least having a bottom four pick and cashing out. So, not the end of the world.
What could have been interesting to add into this was if James being kind of very, very top heavy, not having a lot of depth in some of those spots, was trying to get like Miles Sanders or Debo or Jamal Williams like thrown in here just to give you a little bit more depth. Just um, players that end up not moving that are on expiring deals that if you're paying the first, you might have been able to get T Wells to throw in and kind of give you a little bit of that backup if you do end up having a running back be out for a week or something. You got a little more to fall back on, but overall, not I think pretty decent trade both ways. I said I like it more on the T Wells side than the James side.
Yeah, I think it's good. I mean, it's a heck of value for expiring. I think he did well to get it. I mean, the irony of it all is, as the trade deadline happened, it went from T. Wells being like, oh, I'm gonna sell, to all of a sudden, wait, I might actually be the fifth best team now because everyone else is selling, which makes it interesting as we look back now and say, you know, if he knew what was going to happen at the trade deadline, would he still make the trade? And maybe, he might just like the value in a strong draft year, but he might have been like, I might be able to, have a Jody like run where people kind of lowball against me and I find the right pieces. So we'll see. But I mean, I think it was a fair trade, and I was glad to see, after T. Will's horrible trade to start it, in my opinion, him kind of find the value and um, line there. So
Yeah. If I were him, I'd still take the first. I mean, it's kind of like the similar to what my trade was the first year, where like you could trade off like some of your best players and still potentially make the playoffs. Um, I ended up losing to your lucky ass, but whatever.
that's
Uh,
always good.
but yeah, I'd still take the first round pick on an expiring personally. But I guess I
Yeah,
kind of just
it's also a
take
strong
picks for
year.
players all the time. So
All right, moving on to one where I'll be a little biased. We got the Joe Burrow Derrick Henry trade. Um, I got me as a B. on this one. I got Cholo at a C. Um, it was tough on your valuations. The thought of the trade at the time was I'll go get Joe Burrow and I'll see what happens. It fixes my quarterback hole, and I've got Ramondre. I've got the thing that is Najee, whatever that is. Um, I've got some options on the team. If I wanted to make a run and we won some games, I could make a push, make another big trade, and try to shore everything up, or I could still sell and I'm set up for next year and maybe the year after, depending on Burrow and franchise tag and stuff. With the bonus of I free up $73 to go do what I want, whether that's quarterback, especially as I was more cash strapped and everyone else is resetting. If I can make choices that I want rather than be kind of stuck and looking at things as we go. So I did give up the slightly better pick. I gave up a second. I got 2/3 back. So 2/3 back this year. We'll see. I gave up the second next year that was already had swap rights to Cholo. So in theory, I gave up the worst of our two picks, um, which kind of helped make that easier. But yeah, I mean, from Cholo's side, I mean, he bought an expensive running back, but Derrick Henry, if Derrick Henry keeps producing at the level he is outside of week 1 and 2, is worth every penny. So, question is, where do you?
This Yeah, this trade, like for you, I see all of it makes a ton of sense. I might even give you an A on this trade because of kind of the things you mentioned. You get a solid quarterback, you free up $73 of flexibility. You get, I mean, the draft pick difference is not that big. I don't think that the 2/3 for a second, like if
Yeah, depending on how
say
you
I had a
value
say I had a
things.
stockpile of thirds, how many thirds would it take for me to go buy a second round pick for someone? Especially in this case, like you said, with the swap rights, the worst of a second round pick. So to go buy, say it's 17. Can I go
Right.
buy 17 for 3/3? Maybe, depending
Maybe.
on the team, something like that. Hell, depending on where the thirds fall, if one of them's like 21, you might even be able to just do it for the two. So like I think the
Right. When we're
pick
on when
compensation's
I'm on
pretty
pace for
close.
this is 21 and 22 is what the thirds are on pace for this year.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, we'll see that second
Versus
doesn't mean that if Cholo and I are both bad next year, all of a
hmm
sudden that could be 14, right? It doesn't. It's not out of the realm of
yeah.
possibility that if my team keeps underperforming, regardless
Yep.
of what Cholo does, that might be 14 again,
Possibly. Yeah.
which
It's
is totally different ball
kind
game from 17 or 18, right?
second round's all a crapshoot. Who knows? Like there's been like a hyped receiver that's kind of fallen into there most years. Like you had Ruggs, which obviously
Didn't
didn't
work out for
didn't
anyone
pan
in the
out.
world.
Waddle, I'd say panned out pretty well
Yeah.
the year after. Um, but so like the basically the draft pick compensation I consider pretty much equal, which then gets you into an almost Joe Burrow for Derrick Henry swap, which that's the part that doesn't make any sense to me from like Cholo's side. For you, like I said, you get the quarterback, you solve that problem. You haven't really had quarterbacks the entire time this league's existed. You get one for really cheap for this year and next year. Derrick Henry is going to Cholo for this year. This when you made this trade, he was what, like 1-6, lowest scoring team in the league, nowhere near making the playoffs, making a run, doing anything like that. So like the value of Henry this year being if it's higher than Burrow doesn't matter. It's almost a detriment if he happens to actually win enough to lose the number one pick and not go
I'm
get
I'm here for
what's
that
his
trade.
name.
I'm here
Yeah,
for it.
yeah, I know you are. And then going into next year, you have Derrick Henry. Um, you have Derrick Henry and Kamara both on expiring deals. You have a decent like running back pairing if Kamara's been doing better the last couple of weeks. But you're paying $170 for those two running backs. You're not
Which
you traded a under
I'm
market value
totally good for.
quarterback
I
for a market value Derrick Henry. Like
I mean, it's
I
all in
don't
where you get your value from, right? Like, I think if you can tell me with the way I build a team normally, which is why I paid Derrick Henry, hey, you can. Well, I didn't really want to pay him, but then it happened. Like
you
you can
traded the
have
wrong guy the
two
first time around.
two theoretical like top 5 running backs, and you're paid 170. I'll be like, that's great. I've got $230 to fill in the rest of my roster. Like, I can win the league with that. So I mean, it
The
all depends on your
problem is
roster construction.
Kamara's not a top five running back.
No,
Is even like right now for Kamara how the season's going, if you're getting top 10 weeks out of Kamara, you're pretty happy. Where is he at for the
Yeah.
season? So
I mean, never
Kamara
mind
is
next year, right? When he could be facing a multi-game suspension. So
yeah,
I
he's Kamara is running back 14 right now, tied with Damian Pierce, and behind Travis Etienne, who started the season in a timeshare, Ramondre. So like you're so like the Kamara isn't the Kamara of old. It isn't the Drew Brees Kamara. When you're paying $90
yeah,
for Kamara, you want the Drew Brees
and that's kind of an
Kamara.
aside from the trade itself, right? I mean, that's already
Mhm.
happening no matter what. Derrick Henry's at least living up
Yes,
to it.
but yeah. So I, I just from like the especially for Cholo's team where he's had a couple of rough years, like the first he had injury issues because he had like the Dalvin Cook and he basically just had the trio of permanently injured players that if they were ever healthy could light it up. But so he had the really good year one, but then those guys are all kind of gone. You don't have a super deep team, and then you're committing so much of this money to those two guys. So like I just and then again you getting the $73 or whatever is freed up means he loses that $73
Which he had a
in
bunch
kind
to
of
burn.
flexibility to try to.
So like he was one of the people fully resetting. So I think this trade for him is it's hard to judge this trade for him until you see what he does next offseason. Because if it can go, depending on what the quarterback market does, right? If quarterback market blows up and goes to like what a lot of superflex league values quarterbacks are, now the trade probably looks worse. But also, if he's
Mhm.
able to get a decently priced quarterback, and the prices stay where they are, where he pays an extra 10 for a quarterback, and is a running back that has been a consistent, top five running back over the last handful of years, and Tennessee doesn't look like they're overly great at passing the ball, except against the Packers. I don't hate it, but he's got to build it right. I think it'll be the trick here.
You cut out there for about 20 seconds.
Yeah. Um, I was basically saying I think it matters on how he builds the team. If he if the market sticks for quarterbacks and stays low, it works out well for him. Um, if if not, it depends how he builds the team around Derrick Henry and spends that money. We'll see. I mean, he'd also at the time of this trade had time where if someone wanted Henry, he could go flip him and see what else he could get. He had that option. It's probably what I would have been looking at doing was flipping Henry for sure for somebody. But so I'm not. I don't want to write it off yet. I think you just got to see what he does. He's been really good with constructing his teams so far and sticking to a plan, and it just hasn't really worked out where he built. I'm going to spend picks on quarterbacks. I'm going to build that up. He had two potentially good ones that just by the time the rest of his team didn't come along with Burrow and now Trevor Lawrence kind of stepping up this year. Um,
So
so
I like different kind of team build strategies. Like it's healthy for the league and stuff like that. But just Burrow was of him kind of going off the mold from other people a bit and going for the quarterbacks in the top of the draft and that. Then your return on it just being like the Derrick Henry at this point is kind of the part where I'd be surprised if we go into free agency if Joe Burrow is available this year if Joe Burrow doesn't go for 30-40 bucks.
right, and
So like
like I said,
it's a very under market. I could see it being like Dak went for 41. I could see him being in like the Dak
yeah,
range from a couple years ago,
and like I said
especially
with
with
Mahomes coming
Jamar
off,
Chase. Like,
with Mahomes
mhm,
coming off the thing now, it's going to be where the market sets. Because the market's totally different on a market setting at 60 for the peak for Mahomes and Allen
mhm.
versus a 80, $90 quarterback that I think other leagues might see. And then it changes completely, right? If it's a $90 market, this turns into an A for me and a D for him, pretty
Hmm.
easily. But if it continues dropping, where you're looking at like Dak Prescott money as the top end of it, $8, like all right, so I lost that on $30 of value. But Derrick Henry, if he keeps putting up his shit, might be $100 one, so you only lost out on $10 of value. So I
Yeah,
think we
it'll
just see
be
how he builds his
interesting.
team.
I think it's like the top like 5 or 6 quarterback deals are all expiring.
Yep. So it's going to be a
It's
totally different quarterback market,
yeah, it's
and
Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson are the
yep.
two highest paid quarterbacks that aren't. Who knows what Deshaun Watson's going to look like after 2 years of not playing? So
All right, let's move on. We've got the tight end trade. We got
hey,
Jimmy
that
Jimmy
is
getting
Jimmy's starting Alan Lazard this week. All right,
yes.
because Godwin, Hill, and somebody else are all on buys. at
So
the
you got
same
Darren
time.
Waller, Lazard, and Hawkinson all expiring for one third in 2025 for Jimmy. Um, for Jimmy, kind of a B. You kind of got a handful of guys that might be useful. Waller might be useful when he gets off IR. Hawkinson, seems okay so far in Minnesota. We'll see how that continues. Lazard on a underperforming Packers team, but it's a body and depth, something that I think I've railed on all of our top teams and not having depth, and this gets him some of the depth that he needs to make sure that if he can handle an injury. Um, and Tyler just getting a third, it's rough. I don't know how much more he could have gotten since Jimmy basically had, seconds left, and it was probably more important to use those to go get Ramondre Stevenson if he got into a bidding war there, since Stevenson's a much higher ceiling than these guys are. But um, it still felt a little light and early just to be shipping off
Yeah,
a bunch
it
of these
was.
guys for a single third. I think this was
Yeah, it
like
was the.
a week before the deadline.
Yep,
Give
it
or
was like
take.
Tuesday. I think it was Tuesday, if I remember correctly, before the deadline. So like, yeah, I kind of thought the same thing. That it was a little early where he might have been able to try to shop that around because I think, partially because of like injuries and just how the tight end position's gone this year. I think Hawkinson's like tight end 4.
Yeah.
Um, and seeing him and that's with he's still behind Andrews, who isn't even playing. Just prouder why Jimmy makes this deal, I'm sure. But the seeing him with the Vikings, they've loved not a ton of yards, but they're just letting him rack up catch after catch after catch. So um, using him more than Detroit was. Where yeah, if it take a little time, you might have been able to get a little more out of this somewhere. Um, but otherwise, like I know when Tyler gets to trade deadline, if he's selling, he's selling. Like
Right.
it's a fire sale. Everything must go. And then
So
ironically, he might still make the playoffs.
yeah, like I said, I don't know where
So the,
how much more Jimmy can give. Like I said, I'm assuming that
mm-hmm.
his priority was getting Ramondre, and that price was already being floated as a second and a third. So when he traded the third, it became 2 seconds, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I don't I don't think you'd get too much more out of Jimmy, and I don't know, talking with kind of people a little bit as I was trying to offload my tight ends that are decently solid is kind of, but not worth a ton. Um, there's just not a whole lot of movement there, right? I mean, there's a couple of us that for some reason stockpile tight ends, even though we know it doesn't get a shit, me being one of them. But yeah, I
Some
mean,
of it is too like kind of on same thing with like the Kelsey going back to the Kelsey trade. Some is the your like top favorites potentially to like win the league have your buyers were all like at least decent at tight end.
you know,
Other than
other than
James, no one
James,
had like the glaring hole. Like I have
which
Kittle. You got Steven doesn't really have much to trade, but he still had Everett, who was like tight end 7 or something like that when he was before he got hurt. Um, Jimmy had Andrews, even Jody had Pitts, and then you get into kind of the other teams that were selling stuff off. And obviously you had the guy got Goddard and whatever. So like there weren't a lot of like desperate need teams that just had a gaping hole like you've had some in the past.
I know it's probably
The
something we forgot
top
to
guys
mention.
were concentrated.
Probably something we forgot to mention with T Wells, where it was, James probably could have held out and realized like I'm the only buying team that needs a tight end, right? Like he might have been able to bid
Mhm.
that down, being like, who else are you gonna talk to? Like Jimmy's not gonna
Yep.
trade for him. Like Steven doesn't have enough to trade for him. Like I could offer you a second, I already outbid Steven. Is Kenny gonna come outbid me with a 2-6 record? Like is Austin going to? Austin's not gonna like do that. So like he probably could have looked around and been a little bit on like what else are you
Two
gonna
and
get?
2-5. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Um,
I still only have 5 losses. All right.
you're lucky. So yeah, I mean, I think it was a good depth trade for Jimmy.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. Give up a third. Um, for Tyler, like I said, maybe you could have got more, but I don't know from who, right? So you might have been kind of capped out there. I think if Jimmy had more picks, you might have seen this be 2/3. Um, feels about
Two
the right
thirds, or
value.
if you had another second, or like I
Yeah.
said, we're gonna get to the Ramondre trade, but like yeah, if he wasn't going 2 seconds there, um,
Right.
might have been able to get a second out of this, but
Which.
not it. It's not a trade I expect to change much either way. Maybe the only thing like Tyler could have tried to get back is maybe grab like an option guy or something
Yeah.
that something like that, something small that you can crap out into nothing if it doesn't pan out with how NFL offseason goes, or could be a value down the road. So
All right, let's move on to the next infamous trade. And Jody, I swear I really don't dislike you. I just view team building differently than you. So we've got the Jody and Tyler trade. Jody tries to lightning strike twice, going big on all of Tyler's players and try to win into a title. So, I mean, on the opening remarks, I appreciate that Jody is all in on I'm gonna go try to win the second title, right? Like I've got the biggest profit opening here, $900 to win versus 400 for everyone else. He's taking a shot, right? I think we would both say he didn't have a very good shot,
no.
before this, and now he looks better. But
Before
at what
this,
cost?
yeah, before this, I don't think there was any way he was making the playoffs.
Yeah.
Just because of how the divisions line up, like there's going to be a second team from your division that makes the playoffs.
Yep.
Hell, with Tyler sitting at 5-5 and Wells keeping most of his team other than Kelsey, like two of those could make it because you guys play each other so much at the end. Where you've got Cholo's team that's rough, your team that you kind of sold off and is hurt without Chase and whatever.
And we're just bad.
Like,
Don't
yeah,
leave out bad.
they're just rollover, a couple rollover teams that you should get some wins off of, versus like our division that's just the division of death. Where like I think Jody's remaining schedule at this point. So he played not me last week. Played me 2 weeks ago. He played, I don't remember, who did he play last week? I don't know. I know he lost last week. He plays Jimmy, me again, Steven, and then Tyler, who was selling off. So like you've got a murderous schedule where if you don't make this trade, you almost have no shot with kind of how his team was so up and down. We kind of talked the whole year. He had the big three. He had Dalvin Cook, he had Mahomes, and he had Adams. And if they didn't hit, it was just rough. So it helps some with that, but you could potentially be looking at someone trading 2 first-round picks to buy expiring guys. And I know Swift and Smith got I think a year left each, or Smith might have 2 more years after this. 2 more. You're trading 2 first-round picks, and one of those picks, the one this year, might be a top 4 pick. Like, right. You might still not make it. Like, it's an amazing haul for Tyler. If you look at kind of Saquon is the gem of it, obviously. I think he's running back 2 this year. So you're buying the expiring guy, which you've kind of said, other than Kelsey being an outlier as a tight end. It's kind of been going rate second-round pick. Hell, I think you got him for what? An option year, Terry McLaurin, the first year?
Year 1, yeah.
Obviously, year 1 stuff's all weird and whatever. But so I'm telling Saquon, Zwift, who is like the week before this trade was made, played like 16% of the snaps for the Lions.
Well, you get the whole thing that comes out of like right after this trade of, Jamal Williams might be the starting running back, and I go, right, like, So you had a mess there, and I still believed in it. I mean, full disclosure, I was offering at least a first for Swift and Barkley. Like, we'd had those talks all year where I was like, I was there, I was interested, I kind of believe in Swift.
Some of this getting here is after you kind of started selling off and dropped out. I was the other bidder here. Right. But it was a very different structured deal and kind of what we were looking for, or what we were looking at doing. But it's just not. I don't know what would Devontae Smith's value be in this just as a standalone trade.
I don't even know. I mean, you got 3 years, right? And it's not an
3
awful
years.
Contract. It's $10, but
AJ Brown's not going anywhere.
He's done a lot with AJ Brown there yet, and that's the concerning part. Is, I liked him a lot last year. He showed flashes, and then with AJ Brown, he's kind of just sulked in the background a little bit.
He's been like
a bigger role.
The receiver 25 to 30 range for 2 years. That's what he was as a rookie without AJ Brown. With him there, he's kind of like their offense has gotten better, but he hasn't really raised up with it. He's kind of just held steady. So like you've had it with some of your receivers you've tried to trade on cheaper deals for that like receiver 2, receiver 3 that just aren't valued.
Right.
So like
Keenan Allen not getting traded. Like So it's tough, and I mean, I don't mind Jody giving up his first this year if he's going for it. Like they go all in. It's next year's first when you have the league reset. I mean, that's where I was targeting. if I had good enough players to sell, I was 100% targeting like, hey, I want Jimmy's future picks, which we'll get to, at the very end with I was talking about Steven's picks. Like, I want Jimmy's late picks. I want all these picks down the road, as these guys that don't have picks have to rebuild through free agency, and if they don't hit, my potential, winnings is huge here. Like maybe they keep hitting and keep trading, and then all of a sudden it falls back, and there's, it's okay. But I mean, same thing here with Jody, where it's Jody's got to reset, a lot of his core of his team. He doesn't have a lot. Pitts isn't working out. A lot of his picks aren't. AJ Dillon's not working out right now. Like, where does he turn without that base? And can he build in free agency properly to have a competitive team? And we don't know until we hit next year, right? That's, you
Yeah,
know,
and that's in theory, if you're making this trade, you're trying to have some of the guys in this trade be those guys. But I liked Swift a lot better until the last 2 weeks.
right. Agreed.
Including like I said, the week before this trade was because like I said, I was working on a similar deal involving like Saquon and Swift and a few other players. But like I was getting a little nervous on the Swift part when you watch a guy come back and play 16% of the snaps behind Jamal Williams. Like
Right.
that's a little concerning if you're looking at like a future year value there. Where like, are they souring on him as a player already? The Lions aren't exactly known for having long-term running backs. The last 10, 15 years, whatever. And then obviously Devontae Smith. So like, it's just amazing haul for Tyler. And then even on top of that, you're throwing Algier back.
Right.
So like you're given, not necessarily great this year, but I like potential for Algier to take over in
You
Atlanta.
might do something. You might be nothing, right? Like I think, I'd say there's a higher chance he's absolutely nothing in this whole scheme than he is something.
Mm-hmm.
But there's potential based on whatever happens in Atlanta, in that
I mean,
backfield.
the assumption is for Atlanta, so they drafted him. He's their guy for the future at running back. They drafted him. They drafted London. They drafted Pitts, and they're going to have a high pick this year, and are probably going to go for one of the big three coming out of college. So like, you're going to have a very young like offense, and wherever that offense goes, that's where you could get something out of that potentially. But but either way, if you're looking at trying to like team build for the future with the league resetting, that's the kind of guy you'd want to have as like the upside play on a $4 contract for 3 more years after this year.
Right.
So
I mean, just look at Cordero Patterson is under contract. Um, they have an out this year, but I mean, so we'll see what it all looks like. But yeah, I mean, to me, Tyler got a good haul here. I mean, if Swift comes back and takes over that backfield, I think the value is totally there, right? It's a totally different discussion if we're talking about the Swift that we saw the first couple weeks of the year. Then I think this trade's a fair and may even swing toward Jody getting good value. Um, just if you're talking a top, you get Saquon for the rest of this year. It's about a second round pick. A Swift playing it the way he did the first couple of weeks is for sure worth the first round pick, maybe more, right? For a year and a half of a guy that looks dynamic and just hasn't been on the field, his his ceiling is incredible. And now you're talking about, all right, Devontae Smith. Can I justify Devontae Smith for a second? Devontae Smith in the
I'd
third.
say
I'd say
I'd
yes.
take Algier and Devontae Smith in the third and just kind of wash that out.
Right.
Like just equate that. So you end up with kind of the 2 firsts for Saquon and Swift.
Which,
Kind of the
I
way
think you're
I'd
real
look
close.
at it.
If Swift comes back and plays like he did the first couple weeks, this is a totally different discussion and is on par, and feels totally fair. If he isn't, and if he is the backup now and stuff, then it's not looking good. But it also all
So
depends what Jody does. This trade once again can't be fully graded until we see what Jody does in the offseason. If he has a great draft and finds guys and hits on guys, then
even
this could start looking a lot like the Tyreek Hill trade, where at the time it was like, oh man, I gave up a lot, and then all of a sudden when you win back to back, and you're like, hey, I gave up two 10th overall picks, you're like, all right, I got to steal. Never mind what happened
you
after
gave
that,
up
but
10 and got 11.
yep, and
And
then gave up
then gave
10
up
and
another
got
10. But
something.
the scary part here is you're trying to value this is that 2023 first could be top 4 because Tyler makes the playoffs and Jody doesn't because of his schedule.
Right.
And then that's before you even get into where the 2024 pick comes with like the reset, where like this could be if this is 2 top 4 picks versus to like a 7 and an 8 or something.
Very
I mean,
different,
it's
right?
very, very, very different, especially in this year's draft is supposed to be pretty top heavy. Where if you end up in that top 4, can Tyler build a team off of that? Which he's already got.
I'm gonna assume he's going to talk about draft picks as we lost him there, but my computer's almost working again for a while. But alas,
Up 15 or 16 running backs are all free agents this year. Do what?
we lost you mostly there. After you're probably going to talk about Tyler's picks that he has.
I was talking about Tyler having 2 like solid receivers already on cheap deals with like Waddle and Lamb going into this year where 11 of the top, I think it's like 16 running backs are all free agents to kind of build a team. Where you could see Tyler using this to bounce back pretty quick next year. So
Yep. Let me say with Tyler, bounced back quick last year. That was good. Sold again. So moving on, we get into the previously mentioned Amandre Stevenson trade. Um, that's with me. I get 2 second-round picks, 2024, 2025, and I give up Ramondre Stevenson expiring, and then Damian Harris is just thrown in as a, hey, do you just want insurance? And I don't really need him on my roster. And he's expiring as well, so just kind of a throw-in. But
I mean, you cut
um,
out before you even started talking.
yeah, only for
Okay.
you, hopefully. Um,
Uh, you
but
cut out completely. Yeah.
well, I don't know if it's you or the recording though. The recording might have me. Is what I'm saying. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think for me and A,
Okay. Okay.
Jimmy is tough with Stevenson. On justifying how much the Stevenson value is worth. I absolutely love the guy. I wish I was still in it so I could ride him. Because I think he's a 20-point scorer. My biggest regret is taking his option year and not just trying to re-sign him. Um, but I love what he's doing. I think, as we talked about earlier, I think normally the going rate for expiring is a second, but there was enough people that needed a fill-in. Ramondre
So I don't know if the
Stevenson.
recording's going to catch it, but
So we'll see with Ramondre Stevenson.
I got the word option.
Yeah. So a little more than normal going rate, 2 seconds, but there was also 3, 4 people interested in acquiring him, which drove it up. So I think it's kind of started, and it really only went to 2 seconds because he traded away his third to Tyler, mid discussions on this. So we'll see. Yeah. So I mean, I think it was really a second and a third, and 2 seconds only happened because of the way that other trades happened, and he ran out of picks to trade away. So we'll see.
Are you there?
Yep, I got you. You got anything? Good old technical difficulties.
Yep. There we go. Yeah. Basically, the whole Ramondre
Yeah.
from when you
You
went
might
to
as well
put the
just.
trade up, I got basically nothing all the way through there.
Yeah, you can just give us your thoughts.
I did catch part of what you're saying. I don't know if the recording we caught it or not. I think you said that you didn't keep the option year and just let him
Would have been
go to
nice.
resign, which I think you would have been very under the radar,
Right. I
where
mean,
you
he was.
probably could have got him.
Yeah. I mean, looking back, it's really easy to say, man, I really wish I had signed this guy for $3 for 4 years. But I said not bad value. I said earlier, the only reason I got 2 seconds is because he traded away his third that he was going to throw in. Um, so 2 seconds is a little bit of a misnomer here. Um, that was just really he knew that he needed more than a second, but had nothing else to give me. So hence two
Yeah, I
seconds.
think a second he gets other people who'd be willing to just kind of throw one at it and see what happens.
I know there was
Versus,
at least 2 other people willing to throw a second.
hmm I don't remember
So
if I officially threw my hat in the ring, but that's about where I thought the value of it was right around a second. So if you're just beating other people out, then great. I think I looked at it at the time of the trade, and if you took out it was like week 1 or 2 where there was just like a straight Damian Harris timeshare. He was like a top 5 running back.
Yep.
since then. So um, pretty good value there if he keeps going that way, depending on how, the Patriots always make me nervous because Bill Belichick will just do Bill Belichick things and you'll show up 5 minutes late to a meeting and you won't play the next week or whatever. Was it Sonny Gray who had like 200
Yeah.
yards and 4 touchdowns and was cut the next week because he missed a
We
meeting?
also
Like,
don't have a whole lot of running backs I've ever heard where Bill Belichick is singing their praises week in and week out in the media. Isn't usually a thing that you hear. Um,
was Sony Michelle got a decent amount of praise and then never really panned out to anything there. But I think Ramondre is getting a bit more of that. So um, it's a guy I'm interested to see going into the league reset year where that contract ends up next year. Um, but yeah, good for Jimmy again, talking kind of on the depth thing we've talked about over and over. That's a good solid depth piece, and then you get the backup to it. Say something happens to Ramondre, he does have Harris to then kind of step in. Harris has been solid when he's had kind of lead back roles,
right.
just
I
not
think
quite as good as Ramondre.
that's what we talked about coming in is like both of them. If either of them get hurt, which is why I bought Damian Harris after having Ramondre and traded the Barkley thing, is either of them have been really good by themselves. Ramondre's been better by himself. So it was one of those. Together they're mediocre. Singular they're great. And now it seems like Ramondre's taken over. But same thing. If Ramondre would go down, I think Damian Harris becomes a top 10 running back play every week
Yep.
when he's out. So I
Yeah, he
like it.
becomes an instant plug and play starter. So
Yeah. I
it's
mean
it's one of those like I want the starter in a solo Patriots backfield with just
right.
the way they've been playing. Just didn't know who it was going to be or if it was going to be a solid. We did the running back timeshare thing in like week 1 or week 2.
Yep.
This was one of the few that's actually settled itself out somewhat. So
Yeah. This is. I mean, as we talked about, we had talked a little while ago. Um, Ramondre Harris probably ends up as one of the top 5 option years ever in the league. You got McLaurin, James Robinson, Ramondre. Um, was it Hurts?
uh
Hurts was another one, I think, right?
Waller was an option year.
Waller was the one I was thinking of.
Waller was the one, yeah.
Which, if anyone's keeping track at home, apparently me and Steven like finding option years that are valuable. Um, since everyone we just mentioned was us too. We won't talk about the like dozen guys that dropped Jalen Hurts before he went off, including someone on this phone call that's not me. Um, but so yeah,
I think he was on my roster for a week, and then I
yeah.
had someone come off IR.
So moving on, we get the name value trade, as I'm calling it. So I mean, you get Steven goes out there, he pays for Allen Robinson, 4x at $16. Not great, but to cut him is only $4 hit, not awful. I mean, basically a salary dump trade really here. DK is expiring. You still got the name value, some hype, and that offense hasn't been as bad as people thought. And you get back Donovan Peoples-Jones, 4 years, $2, nice and cheap home run shot, and a third that is thrown in. Um, Steven probably paid a little extra just to send. Probably gave you Steven Peoples-Jones just to take the third off of his hands. Um, but yeah, I mean this is a dump Allen Robinson. I get DK, see if he really pans out. I don't think you were ever really gonna start DK or felt him as a part of core of your team. Otherwise, you wouldn't trade him as you're making your runs. So
Yeah, just because of how like the rookie receivers panned out, he was kind of expendable. Like I think I ended up with, um, I've got I think 5 receivers still that are like top 20. So, and DK was kind of in the mix there, where it's who do you start each week, and just some of the rookies just plan on them coming on a bit, having a roster spot for it, long term versus an expiring DK. It was a deal I could move off of. I get something for it. The Allen Robinson part was a salary dump. It was gonna be potentially Hunter Renfrow, and then he went on IR the week of the trade, and then right after that, Cup goes on IR. So Allen Robinson might actually be useful for Steven going forward, which wasn't really much of a factor in there. Um, but yeah, it was just I ended up because my rookie receivers hit. I ended up super deep at receiver, and yeah, Not I don't think there's too much to talk about there unless you got more. It's just Mhm. That's probably how it'll go based on my playoff luck in this league. So I'll actually probably end up playing Steven and DK will go for 40. So an hour later. To to Steven's credit for never having draft picks, he's gonna league. So other than year one when he paid a ton for Barkley. Do what? All right. So to Steven's credit, he's done a good job uh building teams without using draft picks. You know that your year one was rough. we'll see what we'll see what happens there. But yeah, it's kind of just a depth play for a third round pick, and then well, I don't have depth now. Uh, we'll we'll see. Decent chance it just turns out into a third.